I've been doing DevOps for quite a while. We'll talk about that. I was asked about a couple of weeks ago to keynote a Serverless conference in New York. And I was thinking about, like, what am I going to say about Serverless and DevOps, right? Because that's the question that you get a lot, like DevOps, Serverless, or the earlier gentleman talked about, like, Serverless is not really serverless. Serverless does not equal headaches. So I thought I'd go back to an old presentation I've done. I call it The Art of the Possible. And where this comes from is I get brought into a lot of executive boardrooms, and they just, these are like senior VPs or C-level, like CIO, CTO, and they're struggling because they've heard all these glorious things about DevOps. DevOps this. DevOps that. You can do DevOps to do this. And why aren't we doing DevOps? And nobody gives them the answer that they want. Clue, there is no single answer. But then I think when I go there, and either I'm trying to sell something to them, or either way, now I try to sell services. Before I worked at Docker, I was trying to sell Docker. And I thought I'd look them in the eyes. And I think, do they really want the real answer? And the answer usually is no, right? Because the real answers are hard, really hard. And so I thought one day somebody asked me, could you give a presentation called The Art of the Possible? This is my presentation where I'm not looking at executive in a boardroom, a CIO, CTO, or senior VP, and I'm going to tell them the truth. And the truth would be that they're probably going to say, get out of here, we don't want to hire you. So, AKA DevOps in a serverless world. So, a little bit about myself, just quickly. That's me in the middle. That was DevOps Days Austin. We were able to set a band together and jam. It's like the greatest thing ever. If you guys ever run a conference again and you want to do a music thing, call me. I love it. There's a video out there. It's kind of fun. We're horrible. I mean, horrible, because we're not professionals. But that's Lee Thompson. He's a famous engineering architect, DevOps, and so here's the thing. I'm just going to have a little fun at first. I was at Alibaba conference. The last 2 years I've been invited to do the keynote at the Alibaba Cloud Conference. And sometimes I do these really stupid things like, I have no idea. It was something about Docker and immutable infrastructure, but I have no idea what I was saying. But there's these really nice young men, I don't know if anybody heard of a product called Sensu. Heavy water people, they built this really nice Nagios add-on. It's way better than Nagios. It's really good guys. But, like, they're totally making fun of me. So they've memed me. And then they don't let up. And then now, whenever I'm at a conference and there's a picture of me doing something weird, they do it again. So this is a whole new meme. About the fourth meme they've gotten. For those who don't understand the reference, that's me and Muhammad Ali back in the day. Just a quick thing on who I am. It was a good introduction. I've been doing the DevOps thing at least 10 years, and that really is about the preconception of it. I was fortunate enough. So I had lots of years before. I did mainframes, and I did IBM portfolio products. And 10 years ago, a gentleman named Simon Wadley asked me if I wanted to join Canonical, the Ubuntu folk. They created the first private cloud. This is pre-OpenStack, and I was cloud evangelist. So there was only 3 cloud evangelists in the world: Simon, me, and Jeff Barr over at Amazon, who's still there. So I did that, and then Adam Jacob, founder of Chef, I'll go pretty quick here, said, hey, you look like an old guy. And this was like 10 years ago, right? So we would really like to have an old guy in our startup, because we're all like young kids, and we know nothing about the enterprise. I'm your man. So I joined in. I was the 9th person at Chef. I built the whole customer-facing business of Chef. And the thing about that was Adam Jacob, who's the founder of Chef, handed me a credit card and said, go evangelize DevOps. He didn't even say go evangelize Chef. Like just go out and preach. So I to this date, I'm still the person who's been to more DevOps days than anybody on the planet. I got another gentleman that called me and said, do you want to work on my cloud management solution, where we built a multi-cloud manager. We sold that to Dell. And then 3 years ago, or actually 4 years ago, I started experimenting with networking DevOps. Got lucky, met these 3 brilliant young men. We put an SDN interface onto Docker. We were 3 months old. We got acquired by Docker. I spent 2.5 years at Docker, which is the most insane. Like, if you want to have insanity in a positive way, to watch the growth of Docker from the inside, I did that. I left there about 2 months ago, and I'm going back just into consulting services. Actually working with a lot of government, U.S. government, public. On the right-hand side, just quickly, I was the only American at the first DevOps days. I run something, I know it's pretty far from here, but DevOps Enterprise Summit, where it's just enterprises. I've been doing that with Gene Kim for now. This will be our 4th year. Co-author of the DevOps Handbook, and Labor of Love, a DevOps Cafe podcast I've been doing for almost 10 years. And I put all my I put everything in my GitHub project, Botchgaloop. So if you can remember that horrible name in the middle, you can find everything about all my, including this presentation. So they aren't impossible, right? I've been hearing my whole career all the things that are impossible, right? Linux on the mainframe. Well, most of you are probably too young, but like there was a whole debate about whether Linux, banks would say, John will never run Linux in the enterprise, or will never run Linux on a bank. And then cloud came along. We'll never run cloud in the bank. Containers came along. You get the story. We'll never run containers in a bank. Serverless. They'll never run serverless in a bank. That's baloney. Capital One in the U.S. is already running 2 production implementations on serverless right now. And in fact, the world is actually moving. I say 4 years ago, most technical board level discussions of, I would say, anybody who was kind of emerging in their thinking would say they were a cloud-first organization, which meant that any new project, you'd have to have an exception not to use cloud. It's like 3 or 4 years ago. Just imagine that. The whole world has changed from we'll never, ever, ever to now you have to give us a reason why you cannot use cloud. I will tell you right now that's shifting, I believe, to containers. It's starting to say a container first. Now you have to get an exception not to use containers. I don't think the world is going to go to a serverless first. Now, I could be dead wrong on this. I think what's going to happen is the organizations, until somebody creates a whole new framework for technology, which is quite possible given every 3 years we tend to find a new one, I think the world will stop here for the immediate future, and it will be container first, except from an architecture discussion, should it be function as a service, right? And I think that you'll look at things and say, I want it to be containers, because there really is no reason to not run. And I mean, the exceptions to not running a containerized infrastructure are getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. Trust me. And we can have a discussion about that later if you disagree. So the question now probably be container first, then can you bifurcate or separate workloads that don't make sense or make more sense to be, you've heard function as a service, right? That's becoming the generic terminology for serverless, right? Because it's not just Lambda, there's OpenWhisk, there's, obviously Google functions, there's Azure functions, right? There's a whole bunch of private startups in the US, I'm sure there are some here, where it will build your own function. Ironically, almost all of them run under containers, but that's a different story. So that's the way the world works. Okay, so now serverless. So here's the thing, the question I always get, John, serverless or DevOps? Give me the answer. Like, I'm about to die, I have to know. You can laugh, by the way. If I'm not funny, don't laugh, but if I'm funny, laugh, please. It's like, no. That was the thing about the serverless keynote I did a couple weeks ago, right? Like, that's not the question. Like, the question isn't serverless or DevOps, and trust me, it isn't. And I know some of you thinking, wait a minute, this guy's full of crap. Serverless is real easy, and I just do this, and I put it in S3, and hopefully by the end of the presentation, if you're thinking that way, you'll disagree with yourself. Because why? It's not about the technology, stupid. It isn't. It never is. It really ever is. I mean, serverless is amazing. And the ability to do things faster and quicker and cheaper in certain conditions, like the gentleman who spoke before, it's awesome. But so is containers, and so is cloud. So here's the thing. All right, so I'm going to stop here for a second on DevOps. And the thing that, so I've been doing DevOps for a long time. I would consider myself one of the, now whether I'm a DevOps expert or not, I let other people decide that. But what I will say is, I do not believe there's anybody on this planet who has studied this phenomenon more than I have. Right? More. As much? Yes. So I have studied this thing called DevOps in every possible way, from basically knowing what a capability on a container in a Docker run statement is, all the way to how it maps to Toyota production systems in a legacy. I've covered the gambit. And 2 years ago, I was asked to give a presentation to a CEO of a large bank on DevOps. And in the prep, I thought I was being good because I only had 10 slides. And they were like, whoa, whoa, whoa. You are not going to be able to present those 10 slides to this executive. CEO of a large, like top 5 bank. I'm like, okay. And then they said, you need to be able to tell this thing in like 1 slide. You got 5 minutes, bud. And I thought, oh my God, like I'm a fraud. Like I couldn't, I have a picture I should have put it in there. I do another presentation on human capital with a kid with all spaghetti all over its face. I feel like, oh my God, like all this highfalutin, I'm such a DevOps, I know everything. I realized I couldn't do it. I'd start off with, this or technology and CI/CD, and they CI/CD me right out of the room. Right? And so I thought about it hard. I spent a year thinking about this. And this is the best I could come up with. I'm still not sure I wouldn't get kicked out of a CEO's office. But I said, DevOps is a set of practice and patterns that turn human capital into high-performing organizational capital. Full stop. Now, if you want to go out and buy everybody else's version of DevOps, have a party. I'll go back to what I said. I've studied this more than anybody on the planet. Or not more, as much. And this is my answer to the question. And then I ask you, what part of that includes serverless? Or what part of that doesn't include serverless? Right? That's my point. That's me and my son. If you ever get to Vegas, this is Horseshoe. It's so cool. It comes out over the Grand Canyon. And you want to talk about scary. You literally have to walk. And every person is like, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. It's just a glass. You look down 4,000 feet. It's scary as heck. But dive in. DevOps. So here's the thing. DevOps is lean. I don't know. I was thinking about what kind of audience. Do you guys just want to hear a lot of technical stuff? The truth of the matter is the gentleman before me did an amazing job covering the technical. And I'm sure there's going to be way better people than me today going to technical. And that's not why I'm here anyway. So I'm going to tell you what I think DevOps is in the long haul, and why that relates to this human capital, and why serverless sims right in. But it's not an either-or. And I can't tell you some of the most brilliant minds in our industry who say, yeah, John, I get it. But with serverless, you don't have to really use DevOps. Like, well, what was the part of you, I get it? So some of you know me. I've met a few of you, and like this stuff you'll geek out on. Some of you are like, what the hell is this guy talking about, Toyota? The best book I've read in the last 5 years, if you like what I'm about to say for the next 45 minutes, then read this book. Full stop, read this book. If you think I'm an idiot and everything I've said is horse crap because all you wanted to know how a Lambda function works and the gateway does and this and that, God bless you. I'm sure you'll be an awesome employee. But you will have no fun reading this book. Because Mike Rother went into Toyota and he tried to understand what the heck they were doing and why they created an organization. Anyway, he says, Toyota is not a story about techniques. It's an organization defined primarily by the unique behavior teams continually teaches to all its members. Here's the thing. Whether you use Lambda or not, sorry, you're in the front row. I I'm going to run out of time. But you ever see a speaker say, this is the greatest thing, I'll say, I'm going to ask a question, and you start walking on stage, and the guys in the front row, the guys and girls in the front row, they're freaking out because I'm coming back here. And then I start walking towards, and everybody in the back's like, that's funny. And then you get to about halfway, and they're like, people in the back start freaking out, right? So here's the thing about Toyota. So I love this quote. And again, this goes to the core of my messaging about technology. The original founder of Toyota actually was a loom company. His son actually created the first car company. And there was a question about some plans that got sold from the loom company. Because, by the way, they were doing amazing things with looms. Break the build, if you will. Embracing failure. Chaos monkey. Like in a loom back in the 1890 something. And somebody came to him and said, oh my God, they stole our plans for our new loom. It's going to be unbelievable. This is going to be horrible. And this guy's father said, calm down. He says, by the time they read the plans, understand the plans, and implement the plans, we'll be way over here. Like we'll be way beyond those plans. That's the kind of organization that wins. So again, do you use serverless? Yes. So by the way, if you weren't paying attention, and maybe not, in the U.S. from about 1970 to 2010, prior to that there were 3 car companies, GM, Ford, and Chrysler. And for about 40 years, Toyota decimated. I'm talking like T-Rex. If you ever watched any of those old Japanese movies with the monster dinosaurs eating buildings and all that. Like that's what happened. Study it, you don't believe me. They destroyed them at every level. They destroyed them in luxury cars, economy cars, hybrid cars. And they did it not because of the technology. They did it because they had everybody in the company thought the same way. This is what Rother says in his book. Like if you ask somebody at Toyota at that time, what do? The answer you're not likely to get is, I take these little brake pads and I pull them out of the box and I move them over here and I put them in here. The answer that you would most likely get is, I build consumer-based cars at the highest quality, lowest cost, with the shortest amount of lead time. Everybody in the organization knew that. And if everybody in your organization knows that, then serverless is probably going to be an awesome way to enhance those opportunities or beat your competitors. And they call this the Toyota System House, right? And so what did that equate to in DevOps? The supply chain. We call it continuous integration, continuous delivery, right? And what is continuous integration, continuous delivery? It's about putting automated gates, checks, to build resilience. Automation. Developer submits code. It hits a build unit test, gets kicked back, developer fixes it. It goes further, it gets kicked back by automated test, TDD or acceptance test, gets kicked back. And over time, you are creating resilience. You're not going to want to bypass that in serverless. Now, is it going to be easier? Are there going to be things that are not going to exist? Are things that are going to be API calls? Yes. But by the way, you're not going to want to put shitty code in a serverless infrastructure. And I'll skip to a slide that I have later. Those denial of services, SQL injections, all those things, they don't just go away and go to serverless. If you got crappy code that can be compromised, just because it's in serverless doesn't mean it's going to disappear. Oh, it's serverless. Don't worry about it. And in fact, some of the configuration definitions in serverless that you didn't have to worry. I see this in cloud all the time. People think they've battened down the hatches on all the libraries, everything in the delivery chain, and they ask them about their Cloud Foundation or Terraform or any of those things. They're like, yeah, that's not really part of what we do, from the AppSec people. I'm like, you realize that a bad Cloud Formation or Terraform, or these are configuration management, or even Chef or Puppet or VPC definitions, will get you in more trouble than a vulnerability hidden in a library. But because in your mind, cloud, why would I need that? Don't fall into that same trap with serverless. So if you look at their things, what does that equate to us, right? A shift left. We find things downstream and we move them further. We lowest cost, right? Cloud, open source, serverless. And whatever comes next year, I don't know. There you go. Shortest lead time. Again, serverless makes that lead time, but don't fall for this premise that, oh, it's done because it's serverless and it's fast, and we can bypass that. Because lead time is a lot about humans. Does human test this code? Is this human when the person checked? Are you going to get rid of peering when you do a commit? Is GitHub dead? Anyway, you serverless experts, do we get rid of GitHub now because of serverless? No? Yes? Come on, somebody say you're full. Come on, laugh, right? Do we actually do a pull request and a peer review in serverless? Nah. Of course we do. I think I made that point. Small batch. So the thing is, you can go back to Toyota and you can see exactly what we do today. Go to a DevOps conference and you won't see this house, but you'll hear small batch, you'll hear understanding value stream, you'll talk about things like Kanban and flow. You'll hear what they call Jidoka, which is actually invented by the guy who built the loom. They break the build. In fact, one of the things the reason why Toyota exists is because the grandfather who created the loom company realized when there was a needle breaking in a loom, like there's like 100 needles, right? And they were just building this silk or rug. If a needle broke, what would happen is if you took you 2 minutes to figure it out, you had this horrible knotting in the middle of the fabric, and you had to throw it out. So he built this thing where when the needle broke, it stopped. So he couldn't waste. And then he patented it and then sold that to a bunch of other companies around the world, used that money to start a car company. Blamelessness, this was in Toyota. All over the place. If you guys haven't heard about the Netflix and the Chaos Monkey and all that, right? These guys are famous for stop the line. In the auto manufacturing, they had a rope called the andon cord. Anybody could pull it to stop the manufacturing of an automobile line. And here's the thing. When you pull that rope, the first thing that the floor manager came over to you and said was thank you. Before they even knew why you pulled the rope. Imagine a culture like that. If I have time, I'll tell you a security story related to that. Like, breaking things is awesome. One of the things we found out, if you haven't seen it, we've been doing since 2013 a report. We surveyed over 35,000 people over the last 5 years. But in 2015, we found out something really interesting. We found out that the culture mattered. We found that people who practiced this knew this through evidence, empirical implementation, just seeing it work. But in 2015, the data showed sound, academically rigorous data. You can check the report. You can actually go see the research paper that was submitted that said, if you have a culture that is blamelessness, embraces failure, like people don't get fired for things that broke, the person who stops the line gets thanked, you are more likely, from the data that people self-identified, to be 200 times faster from a culture where people get yelled at when things break, get fired. We got to find who broke it. He broke it, we're done. They're 200 times faster. But here's the thing that was awesome, is not only they were faster, they were actually better at MTTR, their restore time. So they had this culture, and what this did is, it totally destroyed the classic think in IT. So you understand again what DevOps is. It's not Chef, it's not Puppet, it's not Ansible, it's not like an Amazon API call. It's about basically breaking this old triangle of, you can be faster, good, or cheap, pick two, or more likely, you can be faster, which is dev, you can be better, which is ops. We call it core chronic conflict in IT. The truth is, we found out is that with a kind of a DevOps culture, blamelessness, embracing failure, the list goes on and on, there's tons of data. I'm one of 4 authors on the book. I don't make a whole lot of money on the book, but DevOps Handbook has 48 case studies, which all will tell you that this is what they did, and they were faster and more resilient. In fact, most of the data now is showing the faster you go, the more resilient you get. That means faster, but you got to have this culture. And I'm sorry, some of you are probably looking at me like, why am I listening to this culture crap? Because guess what? If you're the one that's just doing a bunch of tech stuff, and you want to rise up in your organization, like start figuring this stuff out. Because a gazillion people know how to build a Lambda gateway. I'm telling you what, my kid can do it. My kid does it. I've done a presentation. My kid does data science. He's 14 years old. He's presenting around the world. Like, he can build a Lambda infrastructure. He can run data science. He's actually playing with TensorFlow now. And he's a mediocre. He's not like, his IQ is like mediocre. This isn't like your son must be this genius. No. In fact, he fails math. Like, we have to yell at him every night to do his homework. Right? Do your homework. Yeah, but I'm working on this R stuff that's going to figure out. Son, you got to get that algebra thing done. And all this goes back to what I think I like about organizations and human capital and all that is does your organization, and I don't care if you're I've done everything, folks. I've done 10 startups. I've worked for ExxonMobil. I've worked for Dell. This doesn't change whether you're a 1 person, 2 person, 50 person, 30 person. At the largest company I worked for was like 65,000. If your organization doesn't have a true north or understand what the business value is of what you do, and business value is not platitudes. It's not just like customer's always right. Okay, we're done. Because I don't know. Some companies don't want every customer to be perfectly served. There's a great book called The Art of Business Value. He'll explain to you the difference between customer value and business value. I won't spend 10 minutes going over it. Read it. See if you agree. But I like to look for companies, and we talked about Toyota. Toyota had a true north. It was that house. If you read right around this book, he would tell you everybody in the organization knew what they were doing. I don't know how many people have heard of SpaceX. Well, not that many, right? So it's like a Tesla, right? You all heard. Right? Elon Musk, right? He's crazy. This guy's crazy, right? Like he created PayPal, sold that. Then he created Tesla, which is really the first consumable electronic car. And he's got this other thing where SpaceX, where they're building rocket ships. I mean, they're building rocket ships. I've been to, my friend works there. Like you go, it's a rocket ship factory, like which is so cool. I mean, you're literally walking around this place, and there's like 10 rocket ships being built. Now, again, there's a couple of you might be close to my age, but when I was a kid, you saw that in cartoons. Imagine me 10 feet away from a real rocket ship. And you know what the true north of SpaceX is? To put a human on Mars. I mean, Elon Musk is crazy. But here's the thing. If you go to buy software at SpaceX, if you try to hire somebody at SpaceX, and you want to spend any money at SpaceX, the question you're going to ask, and everybody there knows this, is if I want to buy Docker. We've got to have Docker. Oh my God, if we don't get Docker, the whole world's going to end. And he's like, yeah, okay, I trust, calm down, I believe you. Let me ask you this though, is it going to get us a human to Mars faster? If you can't answer that question, you're not getting Docker. Alaska Airlines has a very similar one. Alaska Airlines, Chef Khan, the CTO gave a presentation, said that if we can, in under 60 seconds from the plane locks in, and the door opens, in the aggregate, the yearly aggregate, if they keep that under 60 seconds, they can buy 2 new 737 planes a year. And so everybody there, now when I say everybody, of course organizations have bad people, right? But in general, if you go to, and by the way, this was a keynote at Chef Con, and he didn't even talk about chef, right? If you go to Alaska Air in the ideal and ask somebody, what are you working on? It's less likely they're going to tell you they're working on a chef cookbook that implements Tomcat with these different environment variables that allow you to separate out of production and stage. It's more likely that you're going to hear that if I can get this server up and I can keep it up with 5 nines, there's more likely that I'm contributing to an aggregate that gets us at least a half a 737 plane. Andrew Schaefer tells this story about the stone cutters. Andrew Schaefer, brilliant man, little idea, he's great. He's my hero. He says that, he has 3 stone cutters. What do you do? Oh, I'm a stone cutter. Yes, second guy, well, I build these bricks and they go into this large thing and I don't know. And the third guy says, says, oh, I build cathedrals. I don't know if you guys heard about the whole Equifax thing. How many people heard of Equifax debacle? Wow. You guys need to get out more. No, I'm kidding. Sorry, that was so bad. It's a disaster in the U.S. Equifax is the credit authorization, which you give no authorization to keep your information. So they have everything to know about me, and they have never asked my permission. Because when I go to get a house loan or anything, they go to Equifax. And they were basically asleep at the wheel because there was a vulnerability in last March based on Struts 2, part of Java. It was an Apache interface. And Jakarta, it was called. It was a parser. And somebody had figured out really quick that if you put in some code in a little header tag, that it can invoke and be, and by the way, you get access to everything because now you're authorized, and bang, 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 bang. Most people dealt with it. These two companies did not. They dealt with it day one. And because the Fannie Mae, which is a loan company, U.S. big loan company, their true north is putting people in houses. And in fact, on your website, it says our vision is to be America's most valued housing partner. And to them, the idea of everybody who ever put in a loan application to them, their data being out on the internet, sold on the black market or dark web, would not be consistent with their true north. So on March 7th, when it was announced, before there was even a patch, they wrote a script that basically implemented that vulnerability to find out every server that they had that vulnerability and wrote their own patch, right? And even better, Intuit, who, again, you might not know, QuickBooks, and in the U.S. we do all our online taxes with these guys, and they have a red team of 35 people. I know large banks don't. You know what a red team is, right? The people that your own company, that you basically full-time employ to constantly attack your own company. These are like ninja-style security people that basically 35 people. Why? Because they say, we own people's most sensitive data, and we're going to do everything we possibly can to stop that from getting out in the wild. Let's see, I got 26. I think I'm doing all right. Night Capital. Now, you will blow my mind if you had ever heard of the other things I asked, and everybody raised their hand and said they heard of this. How many people heard of the Night Capital thing? Good, we're in sync. That gentleman, hey, 1, 2, awesome. We I don't know if you guys drink, but I buy first round. If it's tea, if it's beer. Expensive scotch? No, sorry. Night Capital is a fascinating story. We actually talk about, this is a company that probably didn't have a true north, all right? We talk about this in the DevOps Handbook, and we could say, it's like the first chapter, the consequences have never been higher. Let me be this broken record. Serverless does not negate this. All right, so this is a high-frequency trading organization, second largest in the NASDAQ and NYSE, the two biggest exchanges in the U.S. High-frequency trading, they do what are called dark trading or latency arbitrage. I don't know if you're keeping notes, but if you want to read a great book, it's called Flash Buys by Jim Collins. Explains how that works. But basically, smart companies hire people that are brilliant, quant people. As far as I can tell, this isn't a stereotype. Maybe it is, but they're from Russia. These genius math people from Russia that somehow always become these financial algorithmic geniuses on Wall Street. And what they do, this is really cool. I think I'm not going to run out of time. I look at the thing, I'm like, should I tell this story? Do I have time? But I want to tell the story because it's fun. So it's called latency arbitrage or dark trading pool. So you're sitting here at some big trading company in Manhattan and Wall Street, and you got to sell just an order to sell 100,000 shares of, say, Microsoft. And so there's some federal regulation says you have to break it up. And in general, you want to break it up because you don't want anybody really tell that you're selling it. It may be a lot more than 100,000. Well, 100,000 is an easy number. So you break it up into 5 trades of 20,000, and you send it out to basically 5 different exchanges. It hits the first exchange at 3 milliseconds. Hits the second exchange at 5 milliseconds. This is just physics. 5 milliseconds. Hits the next one at 6 milliseconds. So these algorithmic math geniuses, usually the ones that won that year's world contest for math, basically figured out they can put code on this exchange, which you pay a lot of money, put code on this exchange, and basically go beacon each other, like through bytes. Hey, this byte means do this. And then they start buying and selling before the stock even gets off the exchange. Again, this book by Jim Collins is like beautiful story about this whole thing. All right, that's great. They made a lot of money, right? All right, anyway, so they had this situation, and if you want to read something, the SEC, which is the Security and Exchange Commission in the U.S., has a postmortem on this, which is like, if you like, we call it disaster porn. I don't really like using that porn word anymore, but it means that you, like if you like to see data center crashes or love stories about, let me tell you the time somebody unplugged the server, and right, this is the best there ever was. So what happened is they were going to so they were using no automation apparently. They were manually installing servers. There was this one application called PowerPeg that was one of these high-frequency latency arbitrage things, and they were manually updating the new version. The system administrator updated 7 of them, but not the 8th. I forgot, got a phone call, coffee, wife, dog sick, got to go to here, lost my homework, I don't know. Sorry. I'm going to just call them idiots, and I know this is what they call counterfactual. You can't go back, and you don't know why all the decisions were made, but sorry, I'm on stage, I can do this. They reused a flag for an old application that, by the way, they never rebuilt the servers. And then why do people reuse flags in 2017? Because there's surely not memory issues. So they reused the flag, and guess what? This old application that had been sitting there waiting to wake up for this flag that bit was always off got turned on, and it started making false trades. They lost $480 million in 45 minutes. The second largest trading company on the NYSE was out of business in 24 hours. It's a human capital thing. Anyway, this is the story. It's the SEC report. I'll make these slides available. You can. So, what does it go back to? I think the DevOps Handbook. I'm one of 4 authors: Gene Kim, Jez Humble, Patrick DeBar. The people I worked with are brilliant. We codified everything we've learned over the last 5 years. It's a good book. In fact, most people now will say that it really is the de facto standard for if you want to understand what DevOps is, this is the book. And that's not because I'm the author. In all transparency, I make about $1 a book. When it's all said and done, I make $1 a book. So if you buy one, I'm not going to say that I don't make money, but that's not the point. This book, almost everybody in the industry has recognized that this will give you the best answer to that question, what is DevOps? And, we do something called the 3 ways of DevOps. Way back when a friend of mine, Damon Edwards, who we do DevOps Kaizen, we codified this thing called CAMS, Culture, Automation, Measurement, Sharing, kind of a loose taxonomy for DevOps. Basically, I think those map very well, although that wasn't the intention. Just to give you a quick, the first way what Gene did in his original book, Gene Kim, if you don't know him, he wrote something called The Phoenix Project, which again, you should definitely read. It's a novel. It's a novel about a modern Java stack, and it's all the things that can go wrong and why the project is 2 years late and how they kind of come to this realization that, quote unquote, things like a DevOps patterns work. So in that book, and definitely in the handbook, we've built it on, in fact, my workshop tomorrow will be first way, second way, third way. First way is left to right. How do we get things fastly through the flow? Remember that pipeline thing I showed you earlier? How do we get from left to right? What are the things that get us faster? What are the things that get in the way? How do we build gates? How do we do that? Second way is right to left, which is, we call these days shift left, but just finding things downstream and moving those checks lower to the left. I don't want to find out something's broke when the customer calls me. If I can check that with a test-driven development or a smoke test or whatever, I'm constantly moving left. The more I break things, the better I get. And then the measurement is again, that goes telemetry, you're monitoring, but not just monitoring because we got a screen up there and nobody ever looks at it. Telemetry. The new term is observability. The young kids are always trying to rename stuff, so serverless. We got one guy that laughs every time, so You're added to the beer club. And there's the handbook. I think there's no way to deny when you talk about DevOps that the first order primitive is continuous delivery, although it is, I always like to say DevOps doesn't equal continuous delivery does not equal DevOps, but it's an undeniable first order discussion, right? Is anybody completely confused right now? Come on, be honest. You'll join the beer club if you do. Either we have no honest people or they don't like beer. And then culture, right? Like we do a really good job in the book to make sure that you understand there are some principles. Everybody is responsible. Even done means released isn't all that. I think of it as like there is no such thing as a service. I'm sorry. Okay, bad, stop. Rewind. There is no such thing as a project. There is no such thing as a product. It's a service. Make sure you stop thinking about things as projects. Projects mean, hey, see you later. Even product, like, hey, see you later. Service means everybody owns it. Like, you're part of that service. Like, you don't, like, go on to another thing unless you transfer or find a replacement. I'm a big Deming fan. Learning is not compulsory, neither is survival. Right? Just says it all. If I had to really go into Jamie Dimon's, that's not who I went to, Jamie Dimon, the JP Morgan Chase CEO, and I'd probably say, hey, just John, you got like 40 seconds here. The practical side of what I've been, like a lot of meta stuff, I found that there's a model that works for improvement over the last, maybe 10 years, but certainly 5 years. I think that, and again, I don't think any of this goes away. I've had this argument with people, at the Serverless conference I did in New York a couple of weeks. About a third of people got what I was saying and agreed, and maybe some of those were lying because they just wanted to be nice. And then a third of the people were like just scratching their head, like, I'm lost. Serverless, cloud, Docker, unikernels, stop. Okay, But then about a third of them they were like they had to come to me and say, John, like I get what you're saying, but it's got to be different serverless. It's got to be. I'm like, no. Oh yeah, but John. And then I said, okay, but like things are easier. Like you have to have a workflow to deliver a service, and I don't care what the service is and where it runs. Bloomberg in the U.S. still runs these weird mainframe. In fact, so that like they're never going away. Ticketmaster, you guys have Ticketmaster here? Like it's one of the biggest places to buy tickets for events in the U.S. They run an emulated version of a VAX on cloud infrastructure, and guess where they're converting it all now to? Docker. So it's a VAX code that's emulated, like they can't get off of it, right? But what I'm saying is that like the process of the work, and the analogy I finally got to get through to people was that when a car manufacturer, in the U.S. like General Motors and Ford, when they started to implement autonomous features into their cars, they didn't go out and build a brand new factory, create a brand new assembly line. They kept the same assembly line, same factories, but in the stream down line, they went ahead and started putting in autonomous functions in that same workflow. Now, there may have been things early on that maybe were a check mark, we don't need this. Now, you still need a steering wheel in most autonomous cars. Well, let's assume there's a day when you don't. So when it got to that point in the assembly line, you just didn't put a steering wheel in this version. But you still had to put, in the US, there are hard requirements for the amount of steel that has to be in the side doors. The airbags, there are things for safety that probably are over-rigorous, but like to sell a car in the US, there are really stringent requirements and safety things. You can't, even though it's an autonomous car, you don't like, hey, it's autonomous now, it will never get in a car accident, therefore stealing the door is useless. Like, they don't do that. The tires, the specs on the tires, the science behind how a tire fits. That's my analogy of serverless. Are there things like you don't need a steering wheel anymore at this point? Yes. But the flow of how you deliver a service and what is the service retied to the true north of that organization wants to deliver to make your, whatever the value that your company wants to build, you still need to look at that at a systems level. And so my message here, and I'm just going to go through some, I think, techniques that apply to anything that you deliver in service, is that you still have to think that way. And the danger is that if you don't think that way, you're going to find out the hard way, hopefully not like capital, but you have to. And even though it sounds icky and you don't want to do it, and your manager is saying, why are you doing all that crap because it's serverless? I thought serverless was going to do this. You're going to have to be brave and say, trust me on this one, boss. We have to follow the workflow. Because if we don't, because the example I gave of cloud with configuration management, I can tell you what, in the US, the NSA, which is our security, like as deep as it gets, we're keeping a whole bunch of stuff that they were using as kind of a role to get to here in S3. So they had all this sensitive data in S3. And they should have been cleaning it up, but that's bad hygiene. Maybe DevOps practices would have helped them there. But they didn't even think about that somebody got in through a Struts 2 vulnerability in a Tomcat server on an outward-facing VPN that were able to get into an unlocked down Jenkins server. I got a whole presentation I do on DevSecOps. Like, if you're running a default install Jenkins server, like, leave now, fix it. I mean, literally, get out of here, go fix it. All right? Because, like, you want to, that's how the bad guy, I saw an anonymous guy the other day on a presentation at a cybersecurity. He just laughed. He goes, I don't know what this Jenkins thing is, but man, if we find it, it's awesome. Right? Like, so the point is you need to have that hygiene, that methodology for delivering services, and don't think just because it's cloud, you don't have to care about cloud formation or Terraform or VPC definitions. All right, so what I do now, I spend a lot of time on what I call DevOps Kaizen. And if you get the sense that I actually like to borrow a lot of things from Toyota and Lean, yes. I've researched almost everything there is to read about Dr. Deming. I think it all starts with Deming, but that's another presentation I've done. And I think when I go in a customer now, if they tell me, John, I need your help, what's DevOps? I say, this is what I'm going to do. If you're not interested, get out of my way because there's 4 other people in line waiting. And I say that the first thing I want to do, I'm small, if 8-person company, we're hiring. I'm killing this guy. He's laughing his butt off, man. Oh, nice. Thank you. I love people to laugh, right? That's good. We go in and I say, before we do anything, I said, I need to baseline your capabilities. And I will tell you this, I say the maturity model, CMMI, all that, for chumps. Chumps. If you know what chumps means, like, you're just foolish people. Because the thing is, those things are 10, 15 years old. The capabilities that I care about are less than 6 years old. There's nobody even tracking, do you keep things in source code? Do you do TDD? Do you do this? What do you do for CI? What do you do for that? My capabilities are about now up to 200 that basically look at things that really weren't even well-defined 6 years ago. And then I scorecard you red, yellow, green. And red is not bad. It means that's why I'm here. This is good. You suck. But now you know you suck. It's not like, do I suck? I don't know. Like, yes, you suck. Because capabilities, and there's a whole bunch of us. Like, there's part of Gene Kim's group. We meet every year in Portland with about 50 of us from the biggest companies, the Barclays, the financials, the IBMs, and we all talk about these capabilities. And then we say, okay, now that we know that you suck, what key outcomes do you want to do to not suck? Right? And so one of them, just a simple one might be, I want this service to have a better MTTR. Like, we're getting killed on downtime. Okay, that's our key outcome. Then we do something which is kind of built off of value stream mapping. And if you don't know about that, it's actually the workshop tomorrow, I'll talk a lot more about this because I have more time. But it's a right to left flow. It is the right way to do this. If I go back and I talk to any of the companies over the last 5 years who have been reasonably successful with DevOps, almost all of them will tell you that they started off with some form of value stream mapping. It comes from Lean. And literally you get subject matter experts in the room, and you start from right to left, and you literally start diagram blocking. But what happens is this isn't a hierarchical chart, or it's people who are involved in the chain that start going, oh wait, between these two, there's these 3 steps. And you start seeing this fleshed out. I'll show you this. From there, the group then decides, now this is a manager who is sanctioned to do this, but is not allowed to play. In fact, they can't come into the thing till the 3rd day. Because it's the team then who looks at the outcomes and creates countermeasures based on the outcome. So if the outcome is to reduce your MTTR, that means be better at resolution time, restore time, then what are the things in our value stream that we have that would possibly capable of that? And then we use a form of what is kata, which is really scientific method. Comes primarily from Mike Rother's discussion, and where you basically use kind of scientific method to find out if you're right. And being wrong is okay, because that's the whole point of scientific method. Wrong is good. It means you made a bad guess. I mean, really, literally. You made a bad guess. And like now you know you made a bad guess. And it actually comes from Deming called plan, do, check, act. In our industry, we do plan, do all the time. Let's plan, do, plan, do, plan. We never go and follow the process. Were we right? Yes, great. Were we wrong? Yes, great. And then, in our world, we try to use Kanban, but it's a visual flow. We build a storyboard. And then here's the thing, we reevaluate. Some of our customers, we're starting to see this beautiful thing of you can't go 50 yards in any floor in any place where you don't see a Kanban and a value stream map. Everything's visual. So anyway, we use this model. We call it black pen, red pen, blue pen, which is, black pen is that truth discussion, right to left. Red pen is identifying waste. At this point, you're not thinking about countermeasures. You're just identifying waste. And then the blue pen is now you're trying to figure out which are the actual countermeasures based on the waste that will get us. But here's another thing. I said maturity models for chumps. MBOs, KPIs, OKRs, they're also for chumps. Because think about an MBO. Your MBO, sorry, I'm using second row now, so you're up. MBO, like you shall do this, and we're going to check in a year from now whether you did it. Really? A year from now? Yeah, I mean, you might be gone. You might go and work somewhere else. I mean, it's like ridiculous. OKRs, it's the Silicon Valley way of redefining, MBOs, KPIs. They're these static, deterministic, it will work like this or the world ends. As opposed to a model where it's a key outcome, it's a hypothesis countermeasure. I'm going to check whether I was right. If I was wrong, we go back to another countermeasure. Right? That's the way things work. That's what kata is all about. Even though Mike Rother doesn't talk about IT or data center or Chef or Puppet or Serverless, he talks about Toyota, but that's what he'll teach you. This is actually an anonymized map of a large company that we did. In fact, this is a funny story. How many people are familiar with F5 load balancers? Yeah, pretty low. Because all the young kids use software-based load balancers. Why would you use a physical? Okay. But anyway, some manager brought us in, and he's like, you know what? I'm always told I have to buy more of these really expensive load balancers. And then, by the way, ELB is based on basically physical load balancers, but that's another story. And then he was just so frustrated that nothing got improved, but he kept buying more. So he brought us in. We did the value stream mapping. You know what it was? It was an XML thing that the Java developers had to figure out that actually built some data that told the load balancers where to geoposition the servers. And there was no error checking on it or anything. And like 30% of their latency was due to unchecked errors in developer XML, which they had no idea. He's like, damn it, I knew it. I knew we didn't have, keep buying those damn load balancers. We do lean waste. The one thing we do about waste is pretty interesting, and this all comes from actually Mary Poppin, the lean software development, is that instead of arguing about what waste is, we use Mary Poppin's 7 wastes. And then it actually comes from Lean 7 waste, but she did a brilliant job, lean software development. And so then there's no argument. It's just buckets. Like the argument then, whether is it waiting or partially done, as opposed to you trying to spend hours, because it's about efficiency. You got to get like a bunch of people that are really important people, very busy people, in a room for an amount of time, which is really hard. So you want to streamline this, and then you get the countermeasures, Kanban. This is DevSecOps. I'll talk about it a little more tomorrow if you want to catch me on a basis. I'm really cool there. It's just that we need to start thinking about a holistic way to think about how we overlay the security on our chain. The thing is, where most of us have been pretty good about how we think about software service delivery, right? If you ask, I just picked some names. It could be anything else. Like IDEs, maybe Eclipse or IntelliJ, GitHub, or like Jenkins or some, Travis CI or whatever you want to use for deployment. It's either Chef, Puppet, Ansible, or Terraform, or a mixture of both. Some deployment stuff, right? But like the thing is, every bucket in our minds is always filled with something. The thing we make in security is we don't have that same mindset. So what DevSecOps means to me is make sure that you have something at every stage of delivery that deals with things like vulnerabilities and library scanning and test-driven development and behavior-driven development that's completely focused on the adversaries. Because guess what, folks? The bad guys, they outnumber the good guys. I mean, they got an army. I mean, you go see a video on a hacker and let them tell you how they get your stuff. It'll freak you out if you hadn't seen it. And the other thing I want to say about serverless and DevSecOps is the OWASP 10 are still valid. SQL injection, those things that you can make those same mistakes in serverless. So this naivety that you can bypass DevOps because it's something new and you don't need that DevOps. You can also get killed in other ways, bad permissions, keys and secrets, still vulnerabilities. In the handbook we have dev best practices. I'll leave that for the reader. I do like the Kata thing, which is this Bruce Lee, although he's never worked in IT. I think he was a Java development, but I'm not sure. I fear not the man who, he totally laughed on that one. I fear the man who has not practiced 10,000 kicks once, but I fear the man who has practiced one kick 10,000 times. Memory muscle. Kata comes from like kabuki theater or karate. I would say that with my 56 seconds left, if you haven't heard about this book, I always tell people, read this book. If you're in a larger legacy company, don't recommend it to your boss because you'll get fired. But it is the future of how Google finally sat down and explained how they do infrastructure and site reliability engineering. It's just brilliant. And I'm John Willis, Bot Group. I love having dialogue. So if you can remember that bottom one, that's the best ways to find me. I love talking about this stuff. So if you reach out to me, most likely, you might have to ping me twice because I'm kind of lazy. But if you ping me twice and told me that I told you you could do this, then if I don't get back to you, I'm a jerk. So I will, because I love talking. If you got interesting stories, you hate this, or you thought this was interesting, or you think I'm a total fool, give me a holler. Hey, thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Awesome.